Well, what's really happening to those streaming across the southern border? Are they being sent back, or is the Biden administration just saying they are being sent back and releasing most? Or maybe both are true and it's just a mess. With that, good evening. I'm Leland Vittert. Another thing that's a mess is a little bit of our technical operations tonight, so bear with us. We appear not to have video. We can switch cameras, though, so I'm on this camera now. We don't have video, so could be a long night of just looking at me reading, but hopefully it'll be interesting. Here we go. A new chapter for John Kennedy's book, Profiles in Courage, is not what typically comes to mind when you think of career State Department folks, but agree or disagree with him, agree or disagree with the policy he is protesting, Daniel Foote is an American hero. Tonight, he was, emphasis on the word was, Mr. Biden's envoy to Haiti. Was because he resigned. This is what he had to say. I will not be associated with the United States' inhumane, counterproductive decision to deport thousands of Haitian refugees and illegal immigrants to Haiti. That's what he wrote in his resignation letter. That's right. A career bureaucrat resigned in protest. I lived in Washington for 6 years, covered the White House for 2 of them, and I can't remember the last time someone quit their cushy government job on principle. Foote notes complaints echoed by many in President Biden's own party. If we have the sound, here is Congresswoman Maxine Waters.
We are following the Trump policy. He is the one that does not follow the Constitution and would not allow those seeking refuge to be able to petition to get into the country. What the hell are we doing here? What we witness takes us back hundreds of years.
But the administration has a math problem. Well, they have many math problems, but this is their first math problem. The optics of 14,000 Haitians under a Texas bridge meant the administration needed to do something, but virtually everything they have done is causing more political headaches. Just look at the numbers. At the highest point, about 14,000 were under the bridge. Now down to 4,000. That means 10,000 processed. The Hill reports 1,400 of them have been sent back to Haiti, leaving 8,600 potentially released. We had been told only family units would be allowed to stay in the U.S. and that the rest would be deported. Jorge Ventura talked to some released near the airport in Del Rio, Texas. He spoke to them in Spanish, which is interesting because Haitians' native language is Creole, meaning they likely lived for years in South America before making the trek to America. But either way, pay attention to the subtitles.
¿Y ellos hicieron un test de COVID contigo o no?
No.
¿Te daron un test de COVID? ¿Sí o no?
No.
Jorge is standing by for us on the border. We're going to talk to him about what he has seen, perhaps more concerning what he has not seen. Jorge, stand by. Back for a minute to D.C. for the second math problem. And this one's a lot more complicated because the president's entire domestic political agenda rests on getting the votes of virtually every Democratic member of Congress on a number of different issues. He hosted a dozen plus in an arm-twisting session late last night at the White House. He met with leadership, progressives, and moderates. It ended in tears, literally. Politico reports Congressman Pramila Jayapal broke into tears as she demanded any deal include amnesty for 8 million illegal immigrants. We're going to talk about that and how immigration has become a flashpoint in the Democratic Party with Pablo Manriquez and Rafael Bernal. We promised Pablo is going to show back up. Communist and friend of the show, Niall Stanage, is going to help us understand the White House's strategy of keeping President Biden away from reporters for the past 5 days. But we start, as promised, with Jorge Ventura on the border in Del Rio, Texas. Jorge, we've been told all along that it was only family units that were being released. Based on your video, it seems as though there's thousands of just about everybody being released. Is that true?
Well, that's what we're seeing right now, Leland, and there's really no way to verify whether these men are actually part of a family units at all. For all we know, they could just be saying this to be processed into the United States and then released into American cities. One thing we're seeing here, Leland, the reason I was speaking Spanish to those Haitians is they are actually coming from Chile. So on the Mexican side and here on the Texan side, these Chilean IDs will be littered across on both sides. These IDs are issued to Haitians who actually already have refugee status. So the reason why they disregard them before reaching to the U.S. is so they could seek refuge here. But what we are seeing in record numbers is these Haitian so-called families being released into the United States. And if you just drive up to any local gas station here in Del Rio, you'll find Haitians waiting to be bussed off to the San Antonio airport. And there I was interviewing some of the Haitian migrants, just asking them if they even been tested for COVID-19 before being released into the public. They told me they have not been tested. And when I asked them which states they're flying into, the majority of the state that I was hearing is the state of Florida. And this is because they have family back there. They're going to reunite with them in the States. But we've really never seen anything like this, Leland, where we have these just record number processing with some of these families either getting a notice to appear, so they have a court order, which can take up to 3 years, or a notice to return, so they have to return or report back to an ICE agency within 60 days, which Border Patrol tells me it's only 13% of the time that those migrants even do that.
All right, I got a bunch of questions based on your reporting because it's incredible. Number one, we'll put aside for the moment the COVID issue, and that if you come to the U.S. legally, you have to have a COVID test and proof of vaccination if you fly internationally. But who's paying for all these bus tickets and flights?
As right now we're seeing is some NGOs and some Catholic organizations here in Del Rio are organizing these flights for these Haitian migrants. And like I said, the common answer I'm hearing is that they're headed to the state of Florida and they're being bussed from here to Del Rio to the San Antonio airport. The single Haitian males are still being deported, but these family units are being processed at a number we've never really seen before.
Yeah, and as you point out, it's pretty easy just to say you're a family unit, and if nobody has IDs, it's hard to prove otherwise. Why now? Why did they come from Chile now to the United States in this huge number all of a sudden?
So one thing that we've been getting here, Leland, is that when I'm speaking to the Haitians, now whether it's the Haitians, the Central Americans, or the Venezuelans, the reason why we actually even have this border crisis to even begin with is that the general thinking was when we transitioned from the Trump administration to the Biden administration, that if you could just make it into the U.S., you won't be deported. Kamala Harris even came out during the campaign and said that they won't be deporting illegal immigrants. But the biggest policy change that we've seen is that when the Biden administration came in, they removed the Remain in Mexico policy. So the Remain in Mexico policy under Trump actually deterred a lot of that illegal immigration. So they all rushed to the border. Now the Haitian community have been coming from Chile, and they actually got stuck in Tapachula, which is a southern town in the border town of Mexico and south of Mexico. But just recently, the local government actually couldn't keep up with the thousands of Haitians that were living in Tapachula on the week of September 12th, which is an independence holiday called El Grito. They essentially let them finally travel out of there, and that's why we see them here. Now, Leland, right across, we're here in Del Rio, but right across from us is Ciudad Ocuna. Now, Ciudad Ocuna is one of the few locations in Mexico where cartel is actually not actively there charging these migrants to cross the river. So that's what we're actually, you've been seeing those video footage of these Haitian migrants crossing between the two countries. Like I said, I've just never seen anything quite like this before.
Well, fascinating that you say that's not where the cartels are charging, because they're charging across the rest of the U.S. border. You've been on the border for months now. I think actually years I've been following your reporting. And I'm wondering what your sources are saying, because we see this surge of Border Patrol agents, CBP, Texas Department of Public Safety, all to Del Rio. You'd have to think that the rest of the border now is unguarded.
And that's true, Leland. So right now I'm in Del Rio, but just 3 hours away, we have another border town called Laredo. So between here and Laredo, and even further than that, there's Border Patrol checkpoints all throughout. The huge issue is when we had this migrant crisis here, is that the Border Patrol had to call an extra 400 agents just to patrol here. So that means that all these Border Patrol agents along southern Texas between here and Laredo are completely unmanned. And according to Border Patrol sources, the cartel is really taking advantage of this, is putting drugs into the country. Right now we're seeing an increase of 600% in just fentanyl being trafficked into the country. This is according to a Border Patrol that we spoke with. 600%
increase in fentanyl just in the past week. Jorge, incredible reporting. Thanks for making it work for us tonight. I know it was a challenge technically, but we're better for having somebody on the ground. Talk to you soon, all right?
Thank you, Leland.
All right, thank you. President Biden's poll numbers continue to collapse as the border crisis continues that Pablo was talking about. The latest Rasmussen polls show him 9 points underwater, 54 disapprove, 45% approve. You can see the lines have crossed. So Mr. Biden is trying to whip votes with the lowest numbers of his presidency in a crisis involving the very issue he's whipping votes on. Not an enviable position to be in. For the State of Play on Capitol Hill, Rafael Bernal covers immigration for our partners at The Hill. Pablo Manriquez, the Latino rebels who knows the Progressive Caucus better than just about any reporter. Pablo, starting with you, Congresswoman Jayapal, in tears at the White House with the president. Did she get any promises after that meeting?
It's unclear what exactly the promises are that she got. I will say this much, though. Leadership is pushing this bill as fast as they possibly can toward the finish line. Nancy Pelosi's putting a deadline on it of Monday, which is incredibly ambitious and unlikely to happen. So I don't know if this means they're just reaching panic mode or if they're trying to install some initiative in both sides of the caucus. But I can tell you at votes today, the squad caucus kind of took over the cloakroom, and they've been in there ever since. It's unclear what exactly they're talking about. There was an interesting moment earlier today where AOC actually voted present to fund the Israel Dome project instead of no. So there was a lot of intrigue around that. But it's unclear what the horse trade is right now on Capitol Hill, in as much as it relates to the budget reconciliation, the infrastructure package, and all these other sort of proposals that are going through Congress. Going back to immigration, though, specifically, I did get one little bit of news at the end of the day that Congressman Jimmy Gomez told me that the Plan B to the parliamentarian, which we've talked about before on the show, obviously, Leland, she had rejected on Sunday the Plan A proposal to include a mass legalization program in the budget reconciliation package. The Plan B proposal, which Raphael knows so much more about than I do, involves pushing back the registry for immigrants from 1972 to possibly 2010, which, as I understand it, would legalize up to 6-7 million immigrants. So at least on the immigration front, there is a large-scale legalization program that's being proposed, that's in the works for another run at the parliamentarian.
Raphael, how worried is the White House, and for that matter, the Progressive Caucus, that this large-scale legalization, which will be used against moderates in 2022, could be the poison pill for either of these bills?
Well, they're worried about everything, because if anything goes wrong with this bill, it crashes and burns. Basically, every Democrat has veto power over it. And what they're having flashbacks of is 2009, when Nancy Pelosi, her first round as Speaker, she'd promised, Democrats had promised that they would pass an environmental package. They gave into infighting, the typical Democrats in disarray story, and they didn't pass anything. And we all know that in the 2010 election, Democrats got absolutely creamed by Republicans, and that's when the Tea Party started, that sort of grew into the Freedom Caucus and sort of the Republican Party that we see today. So they're scared of that. On the immigration front, they need to try everything. They can't seem to give up. If they give up and they lose by not trying, they will lose votes in the House and possibly the Senate, and it all comes crashing down. So it's just one of 10 things that they have to worry about, like it's the end of the world.
It all comes crashing down, and 10 things to worry about. Gentlemen, it seems like you guys are going to be burning the midnight oil through the weekend with your reporting, which we will follow. Pablo, Raphael, good to see you both.
Thank you, Leland.
Thanks, gentlemen. Back in the day when I was a little too pushy of an intern, someone in the newsroom remarked that interns should be seen, not heard. It's a saying that works for interns, but not really for presidents. As we predicted last night, the White House press corps is not happy at the White House strategy of having the president be seen and not heard over the past week as he faces multiple crises.
Why isn't the president telling people himself these images that people say look like slavery are wrong? What are people supposed to take away from the fact that he's not at the bully pulpit himself talking about these images?
I think people should take away that his actions make clear how horrible and horrific he thinks these images are.
At times like this, we're better off from hearing from Niall Stanage, White House columnist for our partners at The Hill. Niall, good to see you with you. I think we can all agree that White House reporters, of which I was one and you are one, are sort of entitled crybabies, for lack of a better term. But are they wrong to complain about not seeing the president?
No, they're both entitled crybabies and right in making the complaint that they're making. Look, as you are well aware, Leland, the White House press corps complains all the time about everything. But there is a legitimate point here. The president has kept a very low profile, and I think there is a political motivation for that. I think, frankly, the White House are so far trying to keep him as far away from this kind of chaos and catastrophe in Del Rio as possible.
Is it the chaos and catastrophe in Del Rio which is problematic, or is it what we just talked about on Capitol Hill of his domestic policy?
Well, in the case of the domestic policy, what I would say is that he does have the chance of victory there. It's by no means guaranteed, but he has a chance of victory. In Del Rio, that's just a bad story for the president, whatever happens. The administration is talking about the fact that they're reducing the number of people who are there. There are deportation flights happening, but it's still a bad story on which they are getting hit from left and right. That makes it a bit different from the Capitol Hill story, in my view.
Yeah, the video we just showed you was the press being ushered out of the Oval Office when the president didn't take any questions. The Prime Minister of the UK did. You probably have a better count than I do, but going to and from New York, to and from Wilmington, Delaware, this event, there were a lot of opportunities to see the president, and he just never made himself available. Is the idea they don't want him questioned about it, and they're worried what he might say, or they're worried there's just not a good answer to Del Rio?
President Biden has a well-known capacity to veer off message, and that's something that makes White House aides and Biden allies nervous. So I think there is a desire to control things as much as possible. The instance you mentioned with Boris Johnson, the White House blamed Mr. Johnson for taking questions without apparently telling them first. So I think there is a desire to sort of keep President Biden on quite a tight leash, as it were, and that is, of course, exacerbated when there's a bad story dominating the headlines.
The control room's telling me, do we have the tweets of all the times that he didn't take questions?
I'm not supposed to take any questions. I'm not supposed to be answering all these questions. I'm supposed to leave. I'll take your questions, and as usual, folks, they gave me a list. First person I was instructed to call on was... I'm happy to take questions if that's what I'm supposed to do.
All right, so we did have it, and that's when they cut him off, quite literally in the live feed. I guess the question is, it sort of begs the question, is the president in control of who he takes questions from and whether or not he gets to, or is he being that handled?
Well, it's a kind of combination of both. You know, in a number of those cases, he said, I'm not going to take questions, or I've been told not to take questions, and then he took one or two. But in general, there is, as I say, nervousness about this. There is a desire to control the message. There is the fear that the president will say something that will change or run across the preferred message of the day. So, you know, on one hand, you have press handlers who want to run quite a tight ship. And on the other, you have a president of the United States who's been in politics for about 50 years and takes a certain amount of pride in his capacity to handle whatever is thrown at him as he sees it.
Yeah. All right, Niall, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Leland.
All right. Up next, the FBI issues a federal arrest warrant for Gabby Petito's missing fiancé. New details, though, on why it's going to be a while till the FBI finds him when we come back. All right, the FAA said today that their swifter and harsher penalties against unruly flyers is working, but there are still twice as many incidents as last time this year. Masks to blame for many of them, as you can see with this gentleman. Take from that people are angry, and overworked flight attendants yelling at people to put their masks on rarely works or helps things. But soon the Biden administration could tell 90+ million Americans they are grounded. The new requirement for international travelers to present proof of vaccinations before coming to the United States is renewing the debate about proof of vaccination for domestic travel. Mark Dumbroff represents a number of U.S. airlines in court and is an expert on aviation law. Joins us now. Good to see you, Counselor. Thank you. At some level, is it going to be easier to enforce a vaccination mandate than a mask mandate?
Well, I think right now we've all seen the YouTube videos because we're all taking pictures on the airplanes when an event occurs of what happens. And I think you really are seeing a combination of the fact that airline stress is just present whenever anybody travels, compound that with COVID and masks and add alcohol to it, and you've got a real problem. We've all seen it. I think the real question, if there's a vaccine mandate regarding travelers, domestic travelers in particular, is going to be a a legal challenge to it, I suspect, because virtually everything is challenged legally by some group, and what effect that may have. And then even if you get the mandate, I think the question is really going to be administering it. Are you going to sort of put everybody in a federal database? How is that going to work? So I think there's a lot to be seen yet. The problem, though, Leland, as we just saw in the video you played, really is the problem of what's been called the unruly passenger. It's becoming an increasing problem. And as we enter the holiday season, I suggest that it's going to become somewhat worse.
The FAA says now that they have zero tolerance. Here's their statistics so far. 3,199 incidents this year, 6 incidents for every 10,000 flights. So you got to fly a long time before something like this happens. Of those 789 cases were investigated, $1.1 million in fines. Does the threat of fines really change somebody who's as angry as we see in these videos?
I doubt seriously that any of the people we see in the videos are thinking about the fines before they act the way we see them acting. What's kind of interesting is the FAA says 789 investigations, and that's so far. That's in 9 months of 2021. In, I believe, 2019, there were 146 investigations reported by the FAA. They also report $1.1 million in fines. I think, actually, that's in proposed civil penalties as opposed to actually fines that are collected, because the FAA proposes civil penalties against passengers against whom they can impose penalties. But then there's a whole process that has to be followed in order to actually recover it. And you know, I've got 5 things that I really believe that the federal government ought to be doing here. One is naming the disruptive passengers when they propose the civil penalty. Customarily, when they propose a civil penalty against an airline, they name the airline or the manufacturer.
So like an FAA list of shameful flyers?
It's a press release. They issue a press release because they consider press releases to be an essential part of their enforcement program by way of deterrence. But they have indicated that it's their policy to not name the passenger in their press release, which frankly makes no sense to me, particularly given the fact that it is a federal crime to interfere with a flight crew in the performance of their responsibilities. And that's exactly what we see on these videos. There should be a federal no-fly list.
I only got about 30 seconds, but I wanted to ask this. Yeah. We watch some of these videos. These are getting physical, and you say interfering with a flight crew. Sometimes these people are fighting with flight crews. We rarely if ever hear of people being charged criminally. Why is that? Do the airlines not want to deal with it?
No, it's not the airlines. I think what's happening is these people are taken off the airplane by law enforcement. Usually they're the local airport police, the state police, whoever services the airport there. They're then turned over to the local prosecutors, and the local prosecutors, it seems, are not prosecuting.
Interesting.
The only prosecution I'm aware of is the incident in which the flight attendant was punched in the face, lost 2 teeth, and there was a federal prosecution. Wow. And I believe the person is now out on bail. These crimes should be federally prosecuted. And frankly, the Attorney General ought to appoint a task force to see to it that they're federally prosecuted.
Huh. Well, that is Sherman-esque. Throw him in jail and throw away the key. Mark, good to see you as always.
Thank you, Leland.
Great conversation. We'll have you back when or if, I should say, the vax mandate goes in. Good to see you, my friend. Up next,
Take care.
Murders are up as the police reform bill is stalling in Congress. What that means for a record high murder rate increase and your safety at home. Being a cop in America is hard. Crime's out of control, and a massive attempt by Congress to enact police reform has just crumbled on Capitol Hill at a time when there is no consensus, quite literally no consensus, about the rules to be a cop in America. News Nation Washington correspondent Kelly Meyer live on Capitol Hill, the Russell Rotunda, where she talked to the senator who tried so hard to get this to work and just could not get to come to a deal. Kelly?
Yeah, that's right, Leland. That's Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. He tells me that he's disappointed that these talks have come to an end. He says that failure to reach a deal means more crime, less safety, more murders, less officers, because some officers may fear being held personally liable. And this all comes at a time when crime is reaching record highs. In 2020, we saw a 29% rise in murders. That's the largest spike since the 1960s. Now, Scott tells me that he felt that a federal police reform bill would have kept communities safer. Here's Scott today when I asked him about this and why Democrats walked away from the table.
Spent several months working on it, and frankly, the amount of misinformation is remarkable from the other side of the aisle. It is disappointing without much of a question.
And Democrats tell me that they could go it alone on this one, either through an executive order or pushing this through without Republican support. Here's Democrats Raphael Warnock and Elizabeth Warren earlier today.
We're not about to stop fighting.
So you don't think it's over yet?
No, absolutely not.
Nobody's given up, not on our side.
And Leland, Scott tells me that Democrats doing reform this way is unfortunate but likely. He says he's still happy to work with anyone who's willing to come to the table. Leland?
Yeah, Democrats trying to get anything through on Capitol Hill by themselves, though, is proving a challenge, you might say. Kelly, great reporting. Thank you. The surge in homicides in 2020 came amid fiery protests in cities and still the ongoing push to defund the police by the far left, with the cops themselves caught in the middle of all of it. The result? Murders surged nearly 30% last year compared to 2019, the highest single-year spike in at least 60 years. You see it in this graph from the New York Times based on FBI data. The official tally will be out in just a couple of days. With that, we bring in Steve Loomis, former Cleveland Police Patrolmen's Association president. Steve, thank you. Should we be surprised?
Absolutely not. The policies in the mostly Democratic-run large cities over 250,000 people, handcuff. They tie the hands of the police. Here in Cleveland, they've been defunding the police since 2006. Not saying it, but they've been reducing our budget, reducing our staffing levels, and we're paying the price for it now. The first thing that goes are the community engaged policing units. That's what we all want. You know, the citizens out there want it. The cops want it. We want to engage with the citizens of the city, but we don't have the time to do it because in Cleveland, we're almost 400 police officers below our budgeted strength. There's no excuse for that. It's just poor leadership. It's mismanagement. And to blame the police.
If you're 400 police officers below budgeted strength, I'm guessing that means it's because you can't hire enough good officers. There's openings, but not the ability to hire. It's true around the country, especially my hometown of St. Louis. But homicides by city in terms of percent increase, Seattle up 74%. We know the things that happened there. New Orleans up 61%. Atlanta 58%. Chicago up 55%. And the numbers go up there. You can see on the screen that's between 2019 and 2020. Mm-hmm. If all of these policies that you talked about change tomorrow, would the murder rate and the crime rates immediately stop dropping, or is it going to take a while to put the genie back in the bottle?
No, it's going to absolutely take a while to put the genie back in the bottle. When they started getting rid of police, community engaged policing units, you stopped having positive interaction with the kids in schools. You stopped having positive interaction with the community at large. Now all they see is police cars zipping one run to the other. And when I go to these community meetings, that's exactly what they say. Where are you? They're not complaining about how we're doing things.
Forgive me real quick, but what does community engaged policing units mean? What do they do, and why are they the first ones to get cut?
Well, they're the first ones to get cut because you have to prioritize the calls for service. Okay. And you have to have people that are ready to go answer those 911 calls. That's the most important thing. The community engaged policing units, the bicycle units, they're great. You're on the street, you're talking to the kids, you're talking to the families. You get to know the people in your neighborhood. That's where we want to be. The politicians don't have the political will to hire enough. They can hire, there's no reason in the world that we're 400 police officers below our budgeted strength here in the city of Cleveland. It's the political will to not.
So what is the issue? Is the issue you don't have enough qualified applicants? There's not a desire to hire people? I'm trying to understand that.
Well, there's a lot of issues there. Right now, police officers are under attack by the left out there. The law-abiding citizens, by the way, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, they love the cops. In every neighborhood, in every city in this country, they want us out there. It's the loud people, it's the people that have had a negative interaction with the police or something that need to create that division to justify their existence and put bread on the table. And that's what it comes down to. Nobody is thinking about the law-abiding citizens and their quality of life or the safety of the police officers that they have working skeleton crews out there right now. So you have to be able to attract people, and in order to do that, they need the people that are in charge of you, the politicians, need at some point to support the police department and support the men and women in it, and not throw them under the bus at every opportunity that they have. And that's what we're seeing now across the country. That's what we're seeing, and that's unfortunate because it doesn't need to be that way.
Now, certainly on Capitol Hill, in terms of getting something done here on this issue, it didn't happen, at least this time around. Hey, Steve, great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right. Rule number one in politics: when your opponent is making mistakes, shut up and get out of the way. With President Biden's domestic agenda literally hanging by a thread, we've talked about that, and terrible PR because of the crisis at the border, most Republicans are doing just that. Except for one, Donald J. Trump. The former president this week went after George W. Bush again, fired back at Senators Lindsey Graham and Mike Lee over comments in the Bob Woodward book, and reportedly is seeking a challenger for top Senate Republican Mitch McConnell. He's also suing the New York Times and his niece over leaked tax documents. We bring in Tony Katz, radio talk show host from Indianapolis, Shelby Talcott, senior White House correspondent for the Daily Caller. Shelby, does this prove that President Trump just can't go a week without seeing his name in the headlines?
I think you may have a point there. I think it's interesting because remember, he did this at the end of his presidency. He was obsessed over these election fraud claims, and he sort of couldn't get it out of his head. And the result was he was going after the Republican Secretary of State in Georgia. And what was the result there, right? The GOP ended up losing in Georgia, and they lost the Senate. A lot of people said that that was partially the fault of the former president. And so we've seen him sort of go on this offense before, and we've seen the results from that. So it's quite interesting that this is, the route he's taking again.
Tony, why can't former President Trump, forget if he just doesn't want to say anything, he feels the need to say something, why not just attack President Biden and leave it at that, or say Maxine Waters is right in attacking President Biden and leaving it at that?
Well, I think it's still a complete and total misunderstanding of President Trump. And also, may I add, I think it's a lot of focus on President Trump when the focus from the heartland and from a lot of America is we left Americans to die in Afghanistan. And we have the squad proving their anti-Semitic bona fides and not wanting Israel to be able to protect and defend itself.
Tony, hold on, Tony. Are you blaming the media for covering what the former president says?
If we're talking about it in relationship to the idea of what the current president is doing is far worse, then yes, absolutely. But if we want to talk about why he's talking about George Bush, it's because George Bush endorsed Liz Cheney. Yes, Donald Trump's going to have something to say about that. A commentary about what happens in the book? Yes, Donald Trump is the guy who says, this is about me, this is not nice about me, I'm going to say something about it. But if you were to ask people on the ground, on Midwest Main Street, this isn't the thing that they're talking about. They're talking about where inflation is, is, where the economy is, and where the southern border is, amongst many other real issues. And Donald Trump doesn't even come in the top 10 in those kinds of rankings.
Fair, and you sometimes double as a media critic. I'm a journalist, so I make a lousy media critic. But let me go at it like this. Sure. In terms of the media, doesn't President Trump firing all this stuff off just give CNN the excuse to do segments about infighting in the Republican Party rather than being forced to cover all the bad things that the Biden administration faces?
No, because CNN would do it anyway. We've seen that from CNN and MSNBC. They can't quit Trump. It's a very, very weird, strange fetish. Now, if you want to discuss the idea of whether or not, as Mitch McConnell, Senate Minority Leader, was discussing, that you shouldn't tie yourself to Donald Trump, I think that's a worthwhile conversation. We should take the lessons about how to fight from Donald Trump, but not necessarily engage idol worship of the former president. I don't have a problem with him, but I think that if you take the lessons and try and teach those out, you get a better opportunity. But to say that CNN and MSNBC are given this opportunity because of what Trump is doing, they've always made that opportunity for themselves, and they've proven it over the last 8 months.
Shelby, so what happens if this fight that the president appears to be picking with Mitch McConnell, because that's the one that would happen the soonest, as it were, comes to fruition? This is the quote from the former majority leader, now minority leader. The book quotes McConnell calling former President Donald Trump a fading brand, retired OTTB, as they say in Kentucky, off-the-track thoroughbred. There's a clear trend moving, McConnell said, toward a place where the GOP is not dominated by Trump. McConnell added, sucking up to Donald Trump is not a strategy that works. We'll unpack that. If it's not going to be dominated by Donald Trump, who's going to dominate the GOP?
That's a very good question. I mean, it's an open field right now, right? And we are seeing the Republican Party. There are some members like Mitch McConnell who are saying, hey, you know, it's time to move on from the Trump era of the Republican Party. And then there are other Republicans who are still in that sort of section. And so it just sort of shows that we are coming to this crossroads, and the Republican Party at some point will have to decide, you know, are we going to go, is the Republican Party going to go back to Trump? Is the Republican Party going to choose another person to be, you know, this leader? Because remember, the former president has not ruled out running again. So that's all up in the air. And it's, I think, in part, whether he runs again will decide on the support that he has from these Republicans in office.
Tony, I only got about 30 seconds, but we saw President Trump go after George W. Bush, trying to pick this fight over the Liz Cheney primary in Wyoming. Does the Republican Party need a fight to the death between the MAGA crowd and the establishment crowd in order to prepare for 2024?
I don't think that's necessary, but the Republican Party still needs to remember how to fight. And Donald Trump is a guy who understands how to at least fight. If you say to me, he fights too many battles, well, that's a conversation. Okay. But being able to fight as opposed to taking hit after hit and doing nothing, that's not what the American people, that's not what Republicans, and that's not what conservatives really want. That day has passed. The idea of we're all principled in losing, you can be principled and win. You just have to fight.
As President Trump likes to say, I'm a great counterpuncher. Shelby, right. Tony, great seeing you both. This was great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Where is Gabby Petito's boyfriend? It is no longer a search. It is a manhunt. We'll tell you why the FBI may have a tough time finding their man. The search for a murdered Florida woman's boyfriend is now a manhunt. The FBI announced it has an arrest warrant for Brian Laundrie, and it could be harder to find Laundrie than originally thought. Reports tonight indicate he's an experienced survivalist, able to live off the land. A former coworker says Laundrie bragged about living in the woods for up to 6 weeks with only a pack of cheese or peanut butter. Laundrie drove home from Jackson, Wyoming to Florida more than a week after his girlfriend, Gabby Petito, was last seen traveling with him. Her body was found earlier this week here in Grand Teton National Park. Her death officially declared a homicide. Laundrie was named a person of interest in Petito's case. He's disappeared. Laundrie's parents claim he went hiking here in a large nature reserve called Carlton Reserve. It's about the size of Disney World. Officials think they may be, meaning officials think the family may be helping Laundrie evade police. Danny Coulson served on the FBI for over 30 years, former deputy assistant director also worked and created the HRT team. All right, let's focus not on Brian for a second, but on the parents. They haven't spoken to the media. Do we know if they're speaking to police?
I think they're not. If I were doing this case, and I'm not, I would like to, I would focus on them. You remember they took a trip together. It looked like they're going camping. I want to know where they went. And the FBI can determine that by a search warrant and go into the carriers that carry their phone service. They will know where they went on their, quote, a little camping trip. If it were me, I'd subpoena them before the grand jury. And when they invoke the Fifth Amendment, I would immunize them and then hold them in contempt if I could, have the courts do it. I think they're the key here. If he's alive and well, and I have questions about that, I don't think he wants to see mommy and daddy in jail. And this might be the thing that brings him back. Also, if there's any communication with the subject and them, that could be harboring. And these are serious charges, and I think it's time to play hardball with these guys.
Brian Entin reported that the Laundries went up and met with their attorney earlier today, came back, didn't talk to the media as well. Then we got this FBI arrest warrant. Federal grand jury indictment out of Wyoming related to Mr. Laundrie's activities following the death of Gabrielle Petito. Kind of cryptic and vague, activities following the death. What's that mean to you?
It means that they have something that indicates that he may very well have manipulated her phone after she died. You know, I can send out a text message from Danny, and it's really from Leland, and that's a possibility. There's a lot of things here that in play, but the technology generally solves these cases, and the FBI does a really good job with that, along with our common carriers, and I think that'll solve it, if in fact, Leland, he's alive, and I have questions about that.
Interesting. The area that he's in is swampy, alligator-infested, snakes, very difficult. And we assume he is in that area because supposedly that's where the parents told the police he went to. Let's assume he's alive. Based on this idea of him being a survivalist, maybe he didn't even go to this Carlton Reserve and he's up in Appalachia hiking again. It could be years or decades till you find him, right?
Oh, that's right. Remember Eric Rudolph?
Yeah.
The FBI's hostage rescue team looked for him, and we never found him. He finally came out of the woods and went dumpster diving at a McDonald's, I think, and a local deputy sheriff caught him. So they're hard to find. But let me say this. I've chased a lot of survivalists into bad areas, and I've seen them come out because they got too many chiggers. So these guys that claim they're survivalists generally aren't. They go out for a weekend, they have a nice tent and whatever. But in this area, there's no water. It's toxic. There are things there that will bite you, kill you, and eat you. And it's a very dangerous situation, not only for him, but also for the law enforcement that are chasing him.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, long days there. And that's, again, assuming that he's actually in this Carlton Reserve and not somewhere else. Danny, great conversation as always. Your insights appreciated. We're smarter for it.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Congratulations on your new gig. It's fun.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it. We'll be right back. Big show tomorrow night. We're going to talk about how China is using the crisis on the southern border against us to embarrass America on the world stage. That's tomorrow. Special Prime is next.